Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us. We are glad you're all here with us today. We'll be covering the topic of planning for success with Salesforce, specifically as it applies to all of you in higher education. We also have a lot of other great webinars coming up in the next few months, and we think of this session as an introduction and a foundational webinar to some of those additional content. And we'll show you what those are in a few slides, but just want to give a heads up that this is our very first in a longer series of webinars to help you be successful with Salesforce. So my name is Carrie Fadden, and I'm one of your hosts for today's webinar. I work at salesforce.org on the education success team, where we create content for customers in the education space. Prior to coming to Salesforce, I worked in higher education for 18 years in a number of different functional areas. So I kind of have that mix of Salesforce and higher ed. And I am joined today by my colleague, Natalie, and I'll let Natalie briefly introduce herself as well.
Thanks, Carrie. Yes, so I'm Natalie Wienberg. I'm a success content specialist on Carrie's team, also creating content for higher ed customers. Much like Carrie, I also come from a higher ed background, and I was a Salesforce customer. And I've been with Salesforce for about 3 years now. Excited to help you guys today.
Thanks, Natalie. So next up, we have just a couple of housekeeping items. And the first of those is a reminder about our forward-looking statement. If you've been to any Salesforce events or our webinars before, this slide might look familiar to you. It's a very long way of saying that you should base any purchasing decisions that you make only on products and services that are currently available today, as we can't always predict when our roadmap or future products we talk about may change. And so just keep that in mind if we do discuss anything forward-looking today. In addition, some other housekeeping items are just related specifically to today's webinar. We are recording, and you will receive this recording and the slide deck by email in just a few short days. We will also add this recording to our trail mix, and that is listed here as one of the bullet points. And a trail mix, if you're not familiar, is simply a grouping of resources around a topic, and it's actually built in Trailhead. So there will be Trailhead trails, but then also some external facing learning materials for you as well. And it's a great way to deepen your knowledge of some of the topics that we will begin to talk about today. So look for this link, our trail mix link, in our follow-up materials. And also want to let you know, if you have questions throughout today's presentation, Natalie and I will be monitoring the Q&A widget in your GoToWebinar panel on your screen. And if by chance we don't get to all questions today, we encourage you to continue our conversation in the Power of Us Hub. And you can join groups like the higher education sector group, and also there's a group for system administrators if that fits who you are. So again, we should be able to cover most, but if we can't, let's continue that conversation there. And what you can expect from today's webinar. So we have a lot packed in to our 60 minutes together, all with the goal of getting you ready for a successful Salesforce implementation project. And so we'll talk a little bit about Education Cloud and move into other topics specific to planning for success, and also about your own success as a customer, have time for questions, and then also additional advice to consider as you move forward working with Salesforce. And we do create our webinars with multiple audiences in mind, so large and small institutions. Ideally, you have at least some Salesforce knowledge, but this is a beginner webinar, and we encourage you just to take knowledge from various parts today. Even if something doesn't relate to you on one slide, sometimes the next slide might meet your use case a little bit better. So please bear with us. And before oh, excuse me, we're going to jump into Education Cloud. So let's talk about Salesforce and the education data architecture first. Before I do that, I did want to pause and just do a quick poll. And we actually will do our polls right in the question widget that I mentioned a few minutes ago. So I'm going to give you a question, and then if you would be so kind as to just pop your answers in the question area. So Natalie and I always like to start webinars by just hearing from who's on the webinar and where are you in your current Salesforce journey. And so let's just kind of look at it like you're thinking about using Salesforce, you're very much a beginner, or are you in the middle stages of beginning an implementation, or are you in the third phase, which is you're already using Salesforce, but looking to use more? So again, it's just, are you beginner, maybe intermediate, where you're doing some sort of implementation, but are looking for advice, or are you in that more experienced group who's already using Salesforce, but looking to use more? And we're already getting quite a few. Thank you so much for doing this. So it looks like we have a few who are more advanced, who have a bunch of operational orgs, a few in the intermediate where they're just beginnings of implementations, and then a bunch of brand new. So Natalie, I mean, looking through, it looks like we have quite a mix, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, it looks like everybody's represented pretty well.
Great. And so again, hopefully in today's webinar, you'll walk away with at least a few pieces of knowledge to help you move to the next stage, or if you're already using Salesforce, to improve the ways in which you operationalize the way you use Salesforce on your campus. So thank you all so much for doing that with us. All right, you all know this more than anyone, but today's colleges and universities are really facing many challenges that they haven't faced before. So perhaps it's shifting demographics, an increase in demand for specific workforce skills, retention challenges, et cetera. And at the same time, your student expectations are really rising. They want that seamless experience they're getting from multiple other areas outside of higher education. And so we view the Education Cloud as a set of solutions that really enables institutions to drive that student success from the life cycle, from prospect all the way to alum. So really, in essence, Education Cloud is maybe an umbrella that exists over our existing tools that you might already be using today or are looking for more information on. But let's take a closer look at how various Education Cloud tools can be mixed and matched for your own specific needs on your campus. First up is in the recruiting and admissions space. And if you're new to Salesforce or a veteran, you kind of sometimes realize that Salesforce doesn't have a one-size-fits-all solution for every institution. And that's actually a positive, because what that means is that you, as an institution or project manager, get to decide which pieces of the puzzle are most important for you and your institution that you want to implement first. So for example, you can mix and match the items on this screen. The little icons are for the Salesforce products like Sales Cloud, Community Cloud, Service Cloud, and Einstein to really create your own recruiting and admissions project that focuses on the areas that are most important to you. For example, is it marketing and admissions you need to improve on? Or perhaps you're looking to really streamline the way you review your data and glean future insights. So again, this is up to you. Similarly, you can design a student success solution that meets your needs for areas of advising, student engagement, or self-service. And some of the products are similar. You're going to see that you could essentially use the same products across different use cases. So if you have a community already in place, you can extend for prospective students, you could extend that community to be for current students, or used one of our product solutions like Salesforce Advisor Link for advising. And finally, the same scenario is applied in the advancement space. You have the chance to implement tools to help you with alumni relations and engagement, fundraising and growth if that's your focus, and also that data and insights area that's so important for decision making. The takeaway here is that whatever the need, you can find a Salesforce solution that will be just customized for you and your particular use case. And we'll talk more about how to get to that use case successfully in today's webinar. Selecting the right or correct for you Salesforce products for your goals is one piece of the puzzle, but making sure you have a strong Salesforce architecture is just as important. The Education Data Architecture, or EDA, can give you a solid foundation for interacting with your students or other constituents. So nodding back to some of the things you need to know about Education Cloud, and specifically within EDA, we did want to mention that EDA has had a name change, and I just noticed we missed it on the slide, Natalie, but EDA originally was the Higher Education Data Architecture. And a few months ago, there was a decision made to broaden the scope of EDA to be inclusive of all education-based solutions. So now when we're talking about the education data architecture, it's really from a K through 12 and higher ed perspective. And we'll be going through a few different pieces of EDA to kind of help you understand what we mean by this, but just keep that in mind. If you've heard of EDA, it's actually now EDA. So the education data architecture uses standard Salesforce objects, which may be familiar to some of you, such as accounts, contacts, opportunities, campaigns, and also some custom objects like relationships and affiliations, all with the goal of managing connections. So these managed connections make it simpler to find the information you need in Salesforce about your prospective students, or alumni, or if you're in our K through 12 space, that can extend to you as well. All customers have the option to use EDA custom objects as they see fit and when they're ready to use some of those. So one thing to keep in mind is that EDA is a framework for your data architecture, but you get to make decisions. It is flexible. So for example, if you wanted to use EDA simply for the affiliations and relationships and not extend that perhaps into other areas of the architecture, such as course offerings, that this is flexible and you can choose which things you turn on and which are the things you leave kind of in the background for the moment. One quick note, just that there are options when it comes to account models and EDA. So if you're not familiar with Salesforce account models, this is the way in which all objects on that previous slide that I was just showing you, it's how they interact with each other. That's the account model. And so the first option available to EDA customers is the administrative account model. And this is the standard Salesforce account object, acts as a container account, if you will. There is a single contact associated with it. This could be an alum, a student, or a professor, or any person affiliated with your institution. And the relationship between the account and the contact is one-to-one. So for each contact you create in this model, you also have a unique administrative account. However, there is a second option, and this is the household account model. And in this model, the standard Salesforce object acts as the household with multiple contacts associated with it. So the benefit of this model is it supports contact management for multiple household members, including address management for the household and seasonal address. We do find that many advancement or alumni engagement users find this model to be beneficial since they are communicating with households quite frequently. In the documentation for EDA, you'll see that both models are talked about, and actually they can coexist in one org at the same time. And again, you can explore the EDA documentation to learn more about that. I just really wanted you guys to realize that there are two options available before you go and create your Salesforce solution. I'm going to turn over the slides now to Natalie, and she's going to walk us through a deeper dive into the ways you can plan for success.
Great, thanks, Carrie. So now that we have had that great overview of Salesforce products that are available to you, as well as EDA, and some things to consider for integration, we are going to actually turn our focus to planning that successful implementation project. All right, sorry, 1 second here. Carrie, I think we might have skipped a couple of slides there.
Oh, do you want me to share my screen? I haven't actually moved it.
No, that's okay. I'll go ahead and present again. Sorry about that.
Okay, no problem.
Okay, so we are actually going to kick this off with another quick poll, and just like the poll that we did earlier, we'll just ask you to type in your answer into the question panel of GoToWebinar. So I want you to think about what comes to mind when I ask the question, implementing Salesforce will help us to blank. So think big here. How do you want to be using Salesforce? And if you wouldn't mind, again, just type in that answer. And remember, there are no wrong answers because this is all about you and your Salesforce project. So feel free to just throw anything out there. Let's see if we have any answers so far.
We do.
Yeah. So it looks like connecting with alumni, creating efficiency across systems, reducing manual work, improving student experience, lots of different ways, and overall connected campus, excellent. All of these are really great, and certainly within the scope of what Salesforce can help you do. Great, thank you all for sharing. All right, so now that we've talked a little bit about having a vision for your project, let's dive into what that vision planning might look like. And we'll take a closer look at each of these steps in the following slide, but here's what your blueprint might look like. So we'll take a look at big picture planning, sketching out your processes, creating your project team, defining what success means in your case, and finally going forward and actually implementing. Now, with big picture planning, you're just basically asking some questions to get to the heart of your vision. So think about your institution's goals for the foreseeable future. Where is there room for improvement? And maybe how can Salesforce help with that? And of course, how will you know that you've been successful? This is a really important thing to think about. So all of these are really good as you're starting to map out your plan. And there's a link here to kind of a worksheet that helps you look at some of these questions as well, and has additional questions also. Now, let's get a little bit more into the actual, how can Salesforce actually help you? So here are just some potential outcomes. You might have real-time, up-to-date information on your prospective students if you're in recruiting and admissions. You can keep your students engaged throughout their whole learning life cycle if you're in student success. And of course, you can build those long-term relationships with alumni and donors if you are in the advancement space. Now, let's get a little bit more into the nitty-gritty of this planning and turn your focus toward the details that emerge from that initial brainstorm that we just talked about. So architects who draw up blueprints often start by asking their clients to visualize their current home's layout and use of space. And then the resulting bubble diagram helps you visualize what and where activities take place and also how each space relates to each other. And so this is actually also helpful and might be helpful for your team to do the same thing. As you can see, this bubble diagram kind of represents major activities and their connectivity. So your sketch might look something like what's on this slide, or it might look totally different, and that's totally fine. This process is really just meant to give you a high-level visual of your work and what's really important to you. And next, let's go a level deeper and actually sketch out the specifics of a process. So in this case, we're looking at a fundraising example related to renewing annual fund pledges. A process map, like the one on the slide, is a really great way to visualize interactions and assets. And assets could be forms or emails or reports, everything that might be involved. It's also a good idea to, or a good way to identify pain points and hotspots that automation could help you solve. And if you're not familiar with process maps, just to give you some context here, each element in a process map is represented by a specific flowchart symbol. So in this case, ovals are showing the beginning or the ending of a process. Rectangles show an operation or activity that needs to be done. Arrows represent the direction of flow, and diamonds show a point where a decision must be made. And then you'll see arrows coming out of a diamond saying yes or no. Now, again, this does not have to look exactly the same for you, just as long as you stay consistent and everyone on your project team is on the same page. Once your process maps are in place, think about how or if these processes can be improved to better meet your goals. So you should consider ranking them in priority order, with the ones that are mission critical and must be addressed being, of course, at the top of the list. And just a note here, we do realize that it does take a significant amount of time and effort to assemble your assets and really document these processes accurately. But we really encourage you to invest in this work because it's really critical for the rest of your planning process. And it will just result in a much more robust and successful implementation. And now let's talk about assembling a project team. Now, to an organization with limited resources, the term project team may sound intimidating. But remember, it doesn't take a huge team to implement a successful project. What's really key is just getting people on board and moving in the same direction. So you'll need to decide who you want to cover these key roles. And of course, it's totally possible that the same person will cover more than one role, depending on the size of your institution. But we want to make sure that you include the following types of roles at a minimum. So first and foremost, your project sponsor. That's the person from your college or university that is going to help provide strategic guidance, hopefully remove roadblocks and support budget as well. And the person from your campus playing this role, it's really going to depend on the size of your project. That's how you'll find that person. Next, you'll want to have an admin. So in most organizations, the admin is kind of the intermediary between the end users, developers, and IT staff, and Salesforce. They're sort of the linchpin of it all. The admin should really understand the larger goal of what you're trying to accomplish and help align priorities to drive the conversation around technical needs. Then you have a project owner, and this person may actually be the same as the admin. This may be one person for these two roles. This person is going to steer the project overall and kind of be the driver. So they need to understand the overall process and move your entire group through the project implementation. You'll also want to have a group of power users. This is going to be a group of your most trusted users, and they're going to be the ones that will work really closely with the admin and the project owner and really provide feedback throughout the project. And finally, you'll want to include a larger, more diverse group of staff as your end users. And these are the folks that are going to help you understand their processes and how they're going to measure success. It's really important to understand the needs of the end users as they exist today, and also what ideas they have to improve their workflows and processes, because really what you're building is going to be working for them. Now, once you have a team in place, it's time to get everyone on the same page. So when you tackle a big project like a Salesforce implementation, you want the satisfaction of knowing you've been successful, and also a way to correct your course if you maybe missed the mark. Defining your success metrics before you begin gets you ready to measure the results of your efforts. It's really important. You may have very specific problems that you're trying to solve with Salesforce, and if that's the case, this is your chance to work as a team to write them all down and think through how you'll know if you've solved them. This is also a good time to review the pain points you identified earlier on in your planning and determine how you'll know if they've been addressed. Here are just some examples to get you started. These are totally don't have to reflect your particular metrics, but maybe you'll want to know if engagement levels have increased among your students and alumni. And you can gauge this in whatever way makes sense to you, but in this case, the example that we're given, just maybe that's just retention percentage or event attendance, or maybe it's community engagement. It also might be more functional ones, like decreased time in processing a payment or increase in productivity for staff in a particular department. So it can be very varied. So just think about what makes sense for you and your organization. And just another quick poll. We'd love to hear from you. Hopefully you were thinking about this in the last slide. What is the #1 metric for your Salesforce project? And again, if you wouldn't mind just typing your answers into the GoToWebinar chat box, and we'll take a look at some of those.
Here's an excellent one that speaks to my former life in alumni engagement and development, which is Laura wanted to use a metric of the % of alumni with up-to-date information. That is so critical to monitor. Yeah. So we love hearing that. Good job, Laura. Robert is looking to track a metric of the applicants who have paid tuition or essentially closed one. So really making sure they're seeing those outcomes when it comes to converting an applicant to a student.
Great, awesome.
So many good ones are coming in. Tracking the ease of implementation and maintenance, metric on incoming inquiries and why they are contacting us and what they contacted us about. Tracking system-wide adopters per different business units or departments, seeing who is adopting at a faster rate and maybe why. And then metrics of other corporations getting involved with the university. I love that, that's great. And then actually, another final metric is actually using the system instead of hiding from it. Yes, user adoption is so key. Yeah, we couldn't agree more.
Excellent. All right, well, those are some really great responses. We really appreciate you guys chiming in with all of this great information. And it sounds like you are on the right track, everybody. All right, so everything we've covered in this webinar so far comes out of the box from Salesforce and EDA, but does require some setup and customization from you as the admin. So if you have in-house Salesforce expertise and experience, you can easily get started on your own. But in many cases, institutions do seek the assistance of an implementation partner to ensure that they have support throughout the project. Now, there are numerous partners that are ready to work with you to customize and set up your EDA-based custom solution. And there's a link on the slide that actually gives you more information and guidance about working with our partners. But just wanted to call out a few Salesforce certified partners. The ones at the top here are ready to help you with your entire Salesforce implementation process. And the folks who are on the bottom here, these three partners, are Marketing Cloud specific partners. So if you've decided that Marketing Cloud fits your needs, these folks will be able to help you set that up as well.
And Natalie, I wanted to just do a quick nod that I added something to the chat window to everyone in the group. There was a trail that came out in Trailhead recently on partner selection for implementation that does give some good advice on how to approach working with a partner so that it's as successful as possible. So the link on this slide will connect you to all the available partners in our education space, but this trailhead will just give some general implementation advice for selecting a partner.
Awesome. Thanks, Carrie. Thanks for sharing that. All right, and then there are also some amazing partners who have actually built a product on the Salesforce platform. So product partners take the highly customizable Salesforce platform and they create something unique that maybe doesn't come out of the box with Salesforce. So it can be things like events management or gift administration, document management, artificial intelligence, and so many more different things. Now, since these apps are built on the Salesforce platform, you will be able to find them on the App Exchange. And I'm just highlighting a few on the slide that have successfully worked for some of our higher ed customers, but there's certainly a lot more, and you can find a lot of really interesting things on the App Exchange, and you can also connect on the Power of Us Hub, which we'll talk about a little bit later, and find some additional solutions as well. All right, so we've covered a lot so far. So let's just wrap up with some final takeaways. So there's an excellent blog post by Brad Struss from Bigger Boat Consulting on planning your Salesforce project, and the blog is actually linked right here, so you'll be able to grab it once you get the slides. And Brad provides some excellent advice on successful project planning, excuse me, and talks about three important factors: complexity, alignment, and commitment. So what actually are these factors and what do they include? Well, complexity is the breadth and depth of your organizational needs combined with the choices you make during implementation. For example, you can decide to put off specific functionality for a later phase, or you can choose to simplify certain features. Now, the higher the project complexity, of course, the higher the project cost and risk. Alignment is the level of agreement among your team on the goals, outcomes, and challenges of your project. And alignment also includes the ability of team members to make tough decisions efficiently and then to stick to them. Now, the lower the alignment level, the higher the project cost and risk again. And finally, commitment. This is the amount of quality staff time. This may include the administrator, project lead, subject matter experts, etc., that is dedicated to the project. Commitment is also the organization's willingness to adapt to a new system and new ways of working. So project costs and risks are certainly higher when an organization lacks this level of commitment. And here's a diagram of sort of what that looks like, how complexity, alignment, and commitment factor into project cost and risk, and also how to find that sweet spot for both. So as you plan your project, focus on ways to create less complexity and more alignment and commitment. And as you're thinking about that, here are some changes that you might make to get to that sweet spot in your project planning. So first, to decrease complexity, you'll want to build lean, maybe with fewer or simpler features. You'll also want to take advantage of Salesforce's built-in platform features and create less custom code if possible. You might also consider planning frequent, smaller releases rather than doing everything all at once. Now, some of these things may be difficult for organizational cultures who really want it all done at once, but your success will be greater in the end if you kind of resist jumping in all the way and sort of rolling it out in stages. Increasing your organizational alignment and commitment, you can do this by taking the time to create a blueprint. That's what we discussed in some of our previous slides. Take an honest assessment of your organization's data maturity, readiness for change, and decision-making processes. You'll want to make sure that decision-making is also a transparent process. Everybody involved should really know what's going on and be on the same page. And you'll want to ensure that staff are dedicated to Salesforce and the project itself. And finally, you'll want to align your vision for Salesforce and a new way of doing things, right? So you don't want to just recreate what you were doing before. This is your opportunity to make improvements, solve those pain points, and really finding a better way to go. So everything we've talked about so far has been theoretical, but what does it look like in real life? University of Maryland is a great example of a well thought out, planful project. Their goal was to enhance communication, promote collaboration, increase efficiency, and just generally invest in innovation. And a lot of this echoes what folks have said on our polls so far. And University of Maryland was able to reach their goals by documenting current processes, finding gaps or opportunities for improvement, and from there, they were able to target solutions with a variety of Salesforce tools and products. And this quote from Rebecca Boehmer underscores the importance of planning. She says that identified strategy and documented processes are the key to being leaders in innovation. And we absolutely agree. All right, so again, we've covered a lot today. So you may be thinking, what is the next step here? Well, here are just a few things you can do today. First, check out our trail mix. Carrie mentioned this earlier. This is where you can find all of the resources we discussed today, as well as some additional things on EDA and implementation and integration. So check that out and review it at your own pace. Additionally, get to know EDA a little bit more. So again, we touched on some of the basics today, but if you're curious to learn more, there's a lot of documentation available, and you might be able to dive into your specific use cases a little bit more. And finally, join the Power of Us Hub if you haven't already. This is our incredible community of over 45,000 users. And this is where you can post your questions, find new solutions, and review a ton of really great product documentation. Just a really great way to connect with other users who may be doing similar things. And also, if you're curious about who else has gone through the process successfully, here are just a handful of our Salesforce Higher Ed trailblazers. These are universities and colleges that have gone through the process of connecting their campus and are now reaping the benefits of all of this hard work that they've done. And finally, Carrie mentioned this earlier, but this session is really the first stop for all of our Get Started webinars. So our goal is to help you get up and running on Salesforce. So so today's webinar focused on the basics and how to develop a plan to prepare your organization for your project. And then from here, you can choose which area of interest speaks to you. So we'll start with our recruiting and admission series in September. We'll also follow up with student success in October, and then we'll skip November because of Dreamforce and Thanksgiving, and then we'll pick things back up in December with our series for advancement. You can sign up for any of the webinar series that are of interest to you on the salesforce.org events and webinars page, or on the sidebar of the Getting Started group in the Power of Us Hub. And also, because you joined us today, we will be sending you an email when each of the series is kicking off too. So there's a few ways that you can sign up.
And I also put a knowledge article link in our chat window that has not only the links to register, but also recordings of previous sessions. So if you can't wait to get to the student success one in October, you can watch our previous version.
Great, thanks, Carrie. And now we'll just pause and see if there are any questions that we can answer for you. Let's see. Carrie, did you see any questions that are?
I did not, but we could keep going, and then with the last few slides, and I can come back if someone does want to put one into the window here. We can certainly circle back. So.
Sure, sounds good. So just a last quick note while you guys think if you have any questions. Once we close out of this webinar, you will see a quick survey pop up on your screen. If you wouldn't mind, please take a few minutes to complete it. We really appreciate your feedback, and it really helps us get a gauge on what's working and also helps us determine what you'd like to see next. So hopefully you can take a few minutes to do that. All right, so at this point, let's just check in and see if there are any questions. We do have a few extra minutes.
There was a question that came in. So Becky was wondering, do we have a tutorial for some of us who are not well acquainted with Salesforce? And so my suggestion would be to use that link that I just put in the window before, the knowledge article. It's on Salesforce Fundamentals for Higher Education. And that provides at least a base level of what Salesforce is as a CRM in the education space. And then also, we think that Trailhead is a really great place to start your learning about Salesforce. And Natalie and I are on a team that is actively writing right now new trailheads just for higher education. So they're not out yet, but those are coming soon. And I think those are where I would recommend people begin. Natalie, do you have additional suggestions for new Salesforce users?
No, I would highly recommend the Trailhead solution, just because if you are brand new to Salesforce and even before getting into the higher ed stuff, I would highly recommend just getting familiar with the platform, and Trailhead can help you do that.
One more question since we have the time.
Yeah.
At what point in the process that you and I just described would you take advantage of accelerators offered by Salesforce? And so accelerators are available for customers who have purchased the Premier support. And our team actually also creates the accelerator. So you're just making us look great. And if you look through the accelerator catalog, there's a lot of great getting started accelerators as well. For example, there is an EDA Getting Started accelerator. There's one on reporting. We also have one on fundamentals of Pardot. So getting started if you're using that particular marketing tool. We have a governance accelerator. So I really encourage you to look at that catalog. I can probably find the link right now. Anything else to say on accelerators, Natalie?
Yeah, I would just say, so there are definitely lots on getting started. Definitely, I would think about what is your goal? What are you trying to accomplish? Accelerators are very focused on a specific topic. So if you just have general broad questions on EDA or, on something like that, it may not be the best fit. You want to really think about, okay, we want to commit, 2-3 hours to this project that we're going to spend with the specialist talking about this one topic. So whenever you're ready to do that, whenever you feel like you have a good handle on your org and you'd like to dive in deeper, that's really when accelerators would come in helpful and be helpful.
I did pop that in the window, the accelerator catalog. In case anyone is interested in learning more about Premier Success, you can find that out from your account executive. We did have a good question just reiterating that the HEDA to EDA, what kind of happened there. And so it is essentially a name change, but there is additional growth and functionality being built out in EDA that expands to the K through 12 space. So for example, the majority of objects in HEDA were focused on the higher education space. And so as we look at new development, it will be broadened to include other use cases for K through 12. And again, because it is a flexible architecture, you don't have to use all of the features that come with EDA. You can simply turn those off in settings, but it's just a nod that There are things that transcend all of education that speak to K through 12 and higher ed, and that we can live in the same space.
Awesome.
And that was our last question.
Yeah, I think that's all. Well, thank you all so much for joining and for your excellent participation. We really appreciate it. And again, just a reminder about that survey, please take the time to fill that out. And otherwise, have a wonderful rest of your day.